Okay, guys, now tonight's B discusses a new drug that the FDA just approved for a blood test for Alzheimer's disease. So I'm going to go through that for you as a new advancement for detecting Alzheimer's disease. Okay, so we're going to discuss that for discussion B. So everybody, if everybody's ready, here we go. The FDA has approved the Lumipulse blood test, making a significant advancement in Alzheimer's diagnosis. This test detects amyloid plaques, a hallmarker of the disease, using a simple blood test or blood draw rather than invasive procedures like brain scans or spinal taps. Okay, the Lumipulse test measures two proteins, PTAU 217 and B amyloid or amyloid one B amyloid 1-42 found in human plasma, which indicates the presence of harmful plaques that disrupt the brain function in clinical trials. The test demonstrated high accuracy with nearly 92% of positive results confirmed by PET scans or spinal taps. This breakthrough could make Alzheimer's diagnosis more accessible, allowing patients to begin treatment earlier, potentially slowing disease progression. Okay. Okay. However, experts emphasize that no single test can diagnose Alzheimer's alone, and additional clinical evaluations remain necessary. Okay, amyloid plaques are clumps of misfolded proteins that accumulate in the brain, specifically beta amyloid or beta amyloid proteins. These plaques disrupt communication between neurons and trigger inflammation, leading to widespread brain cell damage. In Alzheimer's disease, amyloid plaques are considered a hallmark pathology, meaning they are one of the earliest and most defining features of the disease. They contribute to memory loss, cognitive decline, and neural death, making them a key target for diagnostic tests and treatments. Okay. Amyloid plaques form when beta amyloid proteins misfold and clump together in the brain. Normally, these proteins are cleared away, but in Alzheimer's disease, they accumulate and stick to neurons, disrupting communication and triggering inflammation. The process begins when beta amyloid is produced from a large protein called amyloid precursor protein, or APP. Instead of breaking down properly, beta amyloid fragments aggregates into toxic element, which then grow into large fibrous and plaques over time. These plaques interfere with neuron function, leading to memory loss and cognitive decline. Researchers are exploring ways to prevent plaque buildup, including targeting molecules like heparan sulfates, which help. Hold on. Get different sheets. Beta hemifold stick to brain cells. Would you like to learn more about potential treatments? The cell body contains the nucleus, which houses the genetic blueprint that detects and regulates the cell's activity. Dendrites are branch-like structures that extend from the cell body and collect information from other neurons. The axon is a cable-like structure at the end of the cell body, opposite the dendrites that transmit messages to other neurons. The function and survival of neurons depends on several key biological processes. Communication. Neurons are constantly in touch with neighboring brain cells. When a neuron receives signals from other neurons, it generates an electrical charge that travels down the length of its axon and releases neurotransmitter chemicals across tiny gap called synapses, like a key fitting into a lock. Each neurotransmitter molecule then binds to specific receptor sites on a dendrite of a nearby neuron. This process triggers chemical or electrical signals that either stimulate or inhibit activity in the neuron receiving the signal. Communication often occurs across networks of the brain cells. In fact, scientists estimate that the brain's communications network, one neuron may have as many as 7,000 synaptic connections with other neurons. This early loss of synaptic connections is one of the main hallmarkers of cognitive decline associated with Alzheimer's. Okay. Metabolism. Metabolism is the breaking down of chemicals and nutrients within a cell. It is crucial to healthy cell function and survival. To perform this function, cells require energy in the form of oxygen and glucose, which are supplied by blood circulating through the brain. The brain has one of the richest blood supplies any organ, and consumes up to 20% of the energy used by the human body, more than any other organ. In people with Alzheimer's, there is a reduction in glucose entering the brain, and also decrease in energy production that can affect neurons due to their high energy needs. Repair, remodeling, and regeneration. Unlike many cells in the body, which are relatively short-lived, neurons have evolved to survive. A long time, and some keep working throughout a person's lifetime. As a result, neurons must constantly maintain and repair themselves. Neurons also continuously adjust or remodel their synaptic connections, depending on how much stimulation they receive from other neurons. For example, they may strengthen or weaken synaptic connections, or even break down connections with other group of neurons and build new connections with a different group. Adult brains may even generate new neurons, a process called neurogenesis, remodeling of synaptic connections, and neurogenesis are important for learning, memory, and possibly brain repair in people with Alzheimer's. There is some evidence, suggesting decreased neurogenesis in areas of the brain involved in memory and learning. Okay. Okay, neurons are a major player in the central nervous system, but other cell types are also key to healthy brain function. In fact, glia cells, types of brain cells that provide physical and chemical support to neurons, are by far the most numerous cells in the brain. Glia cells come in various forms, such as mitochondria, astrocytes, and oligodendrites. Microglia protect neurons from physical and chemical damage and are responsible for cleaning foreign substances and cellular waste or debris from the brain. Astrocytes are star-shaped glia cells with important metabolic, structural, regulatory, and protective functions. Okay, oligenites from the myelin sheath, the protective and supportive cellular insulation around axons, which are long, slender cells that send electrical signals to other parts of the body. To carry out these roles, glia cells interact with blood vessels in the brain. Microglia cells and astrocytes are also involved in immune responses in the brain. Together, glia immune response in the brain and blood vessels cells regulate the delicate balance within the brain to ensure that it functions as at its best. Recent years, an increasing amount of scientific evidence has suggested that activation of microglia and astroglia cells might play a role in brain inflammation. How does Alzheimer's affect the brain? The brain typically from shrinks to some degree in healthy aging, but surprisingly does not lose neurons in large numbers. In Alzheimer's, however, damage is widespread, as many neurons stop functioning properly, lose connections with other neurons, and eventually die. Alzheimer's disrupts processes vital to neuron and other networks, including communication, metabolism, and repair. At first, Alzheimer's usually damages the connections among neurons in parts of the brain involved in memory, including the uh, endothelial cortex and hippocampus. It later affects areas in the cerebral cortex responsible for language, reasoning, and social behavior. Eventually, many other areas of the brain and surrounding neurons are damaged and stop working normally. Over time, a person with Alzheimer's gradually loses their ability to live and function. Independently. Ultimately, the disease is fatal. What are the main characteristics of the brain with Alzheimer's? Before the early 2000s, the only sure way to know whether a person had Alzheimer's or other form of dementia was by viewing molecular and cellular changes in the brain tissue under a microscope after death. Thanks to advancements in research diagnostics, including brain PET scans, imaging, and blood tests, are now available to help doctors and researchers detect biomarkers associated with dementia in a living person, enabling more precise and early diagnosis. Okay, investigations are underway to determine which changes may cause Alzheimer's and which may be a result of the disease. Okay. Okay, amyloid plaques. The beta amyloid protein involved in Alzheimer's is formed from the breakdown of a large protein called the amyloid precursor. It comes in several different molecular forms that collect between neurons. The beta amyloid 4/2 form is thought to be especially toxic in the Alzheimer's brain. Abnormal levels of this naturally occurring protein clump together to form plaques that disrupt cell function. Research is evolving to better understand how, at what stage of the disease, the various forms of beta amyloid influence Alzheimer's. Drugs that target beta amyloid are also being studied as potential treatments for the disease. Two anti-amyloid drugs, which are lexinab and donab, have have received full approval by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, for the treatment of early Alzheimer's. These drugs help reduce amyloid plaques, and studies have shown that they can slow the progress of Alzheimer's related cognitive decline in some people. Learn more about these drugs and additional medications and other treatments for Alzheimer's. Neurofibrary tangles. Neurofibrary tangles are abnormal accumulations of a protein called tau that collects inside neurons. Healthy neurons are supported internally in part by structures called tubulars, which help guide nutrients and molecules from the cell body to the axon and dendrites. In healthy neurons, tau normally binds to and stabilizes microtubulars in Alzheimer's disease. However, abnormal chemical changes cause tau to detach from microtubulars and stick to other tau molecules, forming threads that eventually join to form tangles inside the neurons. These tangles block the neuron's transport system, which harms the synaptic connection between neurons. Emerging evidence suggests that Alzheimer's related brain changes may result from a complex interplay among abnormal tau, beta amyloid proteins, and several other factors. It appears that abnormal tau accumulate in specific brain regions involved in memory. Beta amyloid clumps into plaques between neurons as the level of beta amyloid reaches a tipping point. There is a rapid spread of tau throughout the brain. Loss of neural connections and cell dysfunction. In Alzheimer's, as neurons are injured and stop working properly throughout the brain, connections among networks of neurons may break down and many brain regions begin to shrink. By the final stage of Alzheimer's, the process called brain atrophy is widespread, resulting from significant cell death and causing the loss of brain volume. Chronic inflammation. Research suggests that chronic inflammation may be caused by the buildup and harmful secretions of multifunctioning Gala cells. Healthy Gala cells keep the brain free of debris. A type of Gala cell called microglia angelphus and destroys waste and toxins in healthy brain. When microglia fail to clear away waste, debris, and protein collections include beta amyloid plaques, Alzheimer's can develop. Researchers are trying to discover mechanisms of how and why microglia malfunction. One study is focusing on a protein called TRM2, which is essential for proper microglia function during stress events, including neurodegenerative diseases. When TREM2 does not function normally, plaques build up between neurons, astrocytes, other type of Gala cells are signaled to help clear the buildup of plaques and other cellular debris. Faulty medulla and astrocytes then collect around the neurons. But don't perform their debris clearing function. They can release chemicals that cause chronic inflammation and further damage the neurons they are meant to protect. Vascular contributions to Alzheimer's. People with dementia sometimes simultaneously experience a number of vascular issues, problems that affect blood vessels, such as beta amyloid deposits in the brain, arteries, arteriosis, hardening of arteries, and many strokes. A combination that can negatively affect brain health. Cardiovascular problems such as high blood pressure, diabetes, and stroke can damage blood vessels and reduce the flow of oxygen and nutrients to the brain tissue. Resulting in compounded damage and increased risk of vascular forms of dementia. Vascular problems may lead to reduced blood flow and oxygen to the brain, as well as a breakdown of the blood-brain barrier, which usually prevents harmful substances from getting into the brain while allowing in glucose and other necessary molecules. In a person with Alzheimer's, disruptions to specialized transporter proteins in the blood-brain barrier may keep glucose from reaching the brain and prevent toxic beta amyloid and tau proteins from being cleared away. This leads to inflammation, which may further worsen pathological changes in the brain. Recent studies have underscored the connection between glucose metabolism in the brain and multiple aspects of hold on. Alzheimer's, including sex differences in risk and the severity of the disease. Researchers continue to explore potential interventions to disrupt the complicated and destructive cycle. How do changes in the brain affect people with Alzheimer's. Scientists continue to unravel the complex molecular and cellular changes involved in Alzheimer's and how they lead to the characteristic symptoms of the disease. Because the changes initially affect parts of the brain that are essential for forming new memories. Memory problems are typically one of the first signs of cognitive impairment related to Alzheimer's over time. Additionally, parts of the brain are involved, causing worsening problems with thinking and reasoning. Okay, here. And remembering. By the later stages, the disease damage to the brain becomes so widespread that a person can no longer communicate and is dependent on others for care. Learn more about how Alzheimer's affects the brain and its symptoms and diagnosis and treatment. You may also be interested in exploring different ways Alzheimer's disease is treated. Learning about hallucinations, delusions, and paranoia. Watching a video about brain donation, and then you can on this site, which is Alzheimer's Association website, you can sign up for the email updates. Okay, folks, give me a second. I'll give you the rest in a second here. Receive weekly tips and resources on Alzheimer's disease related dementias from NIH, alzheimers.gov. For more information about Alzheimer's, brain changes, NIH, Alzheimer's and related dementias, education referral, AD Year Center, education referral. Okay, that the number is 1-800-438-4380. And here's the rest of the information for y'all. At year at nih.hih.gov or www.nih.gov/Alzheimer's. The NIH Year Center offers information and free publication. And then we've got publication about Alzheimer's and related dementia for families and caregivers. and health professionals. And Ear Center staff answer the phone and email and written requests and make referrals to local and international resources. Okay, so there you go, folks. That's B for you. I will be back on with C shortly. Give me a bit for C, please. And I'll be back on shortly with you. For now, Gator Wellness. Take care, folks.